Good evening. There is no argument that Expo was a magnificent success, and the glories of Expo will live on forever. But the future of British Columbia does not depend on Expo. It depends on the election on October 22nd. And now would be a time to have a look quite soberly at some of the major issues facing the people of British Columbia with some of the major candidates and informants, you might say. First, Steve with the rundown.
The education debate. Has economic restraint bit into the quality of our schools? Premier Bill Vander Zalm has turned down an invitation to debate the issue. But the people closest to it aren't giving up, and they're in the studio with Webster. But first, Jack Davis is off and running again in North Vancouver-Seymour. The Maverick MLA wants to be sent back to Victoria as the Social Credit Minister of Energy. But David Schreck is challenging him for the job. He's an economist and director of the Pacific Group for Policy Alternatives, and he's running for the NDP. Tonight they meet in the studio with Webster.
And first it's Jack Davis, later David Schreck, and then we'll have them together in their own little personal debate. Mr. Davis, a remarkable change in your fortunes with the removal of the Bennett government, and there you were up at Whistler taking a leading part in putting the outcast Vander Zalm in as the Prime Minister selected by the delegates. Don't you feel it's been an incredible change in your fortunes and a somewhat mystifying change in the political leadership of British Columbia?
Well, it's a change in my job. I hate to give up writing critical letters to the editor, Jack, but still there's an opportunity to help shape some events, and as a cabinet minister I'll do my best to do that.
But your lips are going to be sealed except within caucus, I hope not.
Well, the federal government's fair game, local issues are fair game, so they won't always be sealed.
The biggest issue in British Columbia, in my humble view, is the question of jobs and economic improvements in our economic prospects. Am I correct?
Right.
You're a man who was, for instance, dead set against Site C Dam. What do you say to Mr. Vander Zalm's, oh, we'll look at it if we can make money on it? Because as you and I would agree, he knows nothing about the economics of Site C Dam.
Well, Jack, I'm not dead set against any project. I'm not dead set against Site C. But we can't build it. Indeed, we wouldn't be allowed to build it by the federal government unless we had contracts, in that case, in the United States, at a high enough price to pay for it, and pay for it with a good margin. So that has to be demonstrated. In other words, the economics have to be proven. If they're proven, Site C's go.
But, I mean, tell me yourself, as if you were still a Maverick MLA, is there any way, in fact, I'm sure you've used figures, which says it costs us 13 cents a kilowatt hour to build it and transmit it, and the most we'd get is 5 cents American for power from the Columbia River?
Well, first, it's no go. I'd be critical, but so would the National Energy Board, so would the U.S. Federal Power Commission. They'd throw it out, so it'd be no go for those reasons. It has to be economic, it has to be profitable, it has to be profitable for us.
In other words, nobody can get up in the final stages of the campaign and say, we shall build Site C for sure and supply 2,000 or 3,000 mega project jobs.
They can't prove that today.
Now, you were dead against the pipeline to Vancouver Island, the gas pipeline to Vancouver Island.
Yes.
And now here's Vander Zalm saying, we need that federal money, we'll put that gas pipeline in. What will your advice be on that?
If we can get $300 million from Ottawa, we'll build it.
Even though it's not economic? Well,
it's $300 million we won't get otherwise. They spent double that extending gas lines into Quebec. The Liberal government, now the Conservative government in Ottawa said, look, it's BC's turn. If they'll give us enough money, this uneconomic project will happen.
Yeah, but at the same time, we've got unused power capacity going across Lasqueti, have we not? We can give Vancouver Island all the pipelines they want.
All the power, all the power they want. And the NDP, and I think with some justification, is urging that we should use power on the island. We can certainly deliver it. We're spilling water on our mainland dams for space heating. But if Ottawa has $300 million waiting there for us, we'll build a pipeline as well.
I'm shouting at you at a public meeting in North Vancouver-Seymour. What jobs are you going to do? You're the great developers, but social credit, the $450 million for a highway up the island, Coquihalla into Kelowna, and all the rest of these things. What jobs, Jack Davis, is social credit under Van der Zalm going to promise us now in our moment of economic desperation?
Well, just one area, explicitly, IOUs, investor-owned utilities. There are a number of companies around the world that would love to use uniquely produced low-cost power in some of the remote areas of British Columbia if they could put their plant right next to that power and develop it locally. We've had a policy whereby hydro did everything, averaged everything, homogenized everything, and the uniquely low-cost sources were therefore unavailable to develop particular industries. Aluminum's a large-scale industry, but there are many smaller-scale ones. Refining metals, producing fertilizers, those kinds of
industries. But if you did that, you would bleed BC Hydro to death. It's already being cut and trimmed and pulled back and all the rest of it. I mean, if you go into IOUs, little private utilities, small as beautiful, that would kill, would certainly damage BC Hydro a lot.
No, because Hydro's big job is to deliver electricity and gas in the Lower Mainland to residential, commercial, small industrial, and so on. I'm talking about big single-purpose industries, or not so big single-purpose industries, new ones, new jobs, construction and operations.
Now, let's go to another, what's the word, not a barnacle, octopus on your back, Northeast coal. That's surely one of the great debt draggers down of British Columbia, which was a bad deal. And you're an economist, you're an expert, you've studied it. That was a terrible mistake for BC, wasn't it?
Northeast coal exists. We've got the rail lines, we've got the port facilities now, and it's our job, it'll be the job of the next government to make the best of what we have. And what Northeast coal did do was ensure that Prince Rupert developed as the other big port on our west coast. We only had Vancouver previously. So whatever you will say about Northeast coal, at least it got the northern rail system, the northern port system going.
Now, on education, you've been a guy who's been very critical of the government. I remember you saying social credit has got far too many, bigger cabinet, too many members, is not decisive at all. And on education, you must say the record of Bennett's restraint has damaged our public school system and our universities.
I don't think it's damaged it. I think we've had to have restraint. We haven't done a good job of selling restraint. I think that our teachers, for example, are still delivering first-class education in the schoolroom. We have a declining school population, and whatever government is formed, it'll have to face the fact that there are fewer youngsters out there, and that the taxes would have to be increased if we're to pay teachers more.
Well, you're pretty good on the finances, and you know the dreadful problem that the finance minister is going to have if you win the election. Right. How bad a problem? He's got no money for education or universities, has he?
Oh, we can maintain education certainly at its present per-student cost, say $4,000 per student. That's the cost of education. That kind of expenditure will be maintained. We have to increase, modestly, however, year by year, health care coverage. We can cut back on some things. We can. We've had $1 billion a year highway program. We could have a $500 million a year highway program and cut our budget deficit in half. I'm being simplistic, but I'm indicating areas where there can be restraint, which helps solve our budget problem.
In other words, if you have Van der Zalm's ear, you'll say, hey, stop the $450 million up the island. Stop another $600 million to Kelowna. Coquihalla was a dreadful outpouring of public funds.
Well, I wouldn't say stop. I'd say do it in measured increments, measured amounts each year. Don't try and do it in 12 months or 18 months. Do it over a period of time. And I'd go for some more economic projects, and the short crossing over the Strait of Georgia, in my mind, is one of them. It's at the mainland end, it's $100 million. And you'd have a 1-hour crossing over the Strait of Georgia. The people in the Lower Mainland, and certainly the North Shore, would bless us, and particularly the people in Middle and Northern Ireland would bless us.
Were you not in charge of the ferries at one time?
I am now.
You are now in charge of the ferries?
That's right.
And you have raised the old ghost on Gabriola?
Well, I hope to close the ghost, but the project hasn't been sold totally to Cabinet. I hope I can sell it.
You will be an advocate for the 1-hour crossing from Iona to what?
To Gabriola.
To Gabriola.
Nanaimo, essentially, yes.
Would that cut out Horseshoe Bay altogether and make North Vancouver more livable?
It'd make the North Shore more livable. It wouldn't cut out Horseshoe Bay to Gabriola completely, but it would mean that the bulk of the traffic would go over the short crossing, Vancouver Airport, essentially, to Vancouver Island.
One nasty little question. You don't mind, do you? Should a woman have pro-choice for abortions?
pro-choice.
No, it's, a woman has the right to control her body, because Van der Zam's against that, basically, up here.
I have to say yes. I voted for it when I was a federal member.
Good for you. Oh, I'm not allowed to express opinion. Thank you for a straight answer. That's Jack Davis, the Honourable thereof, followed by David Schreck, and then a debate between the two of them after the break. This is David Schreck's second bid for the provincial legislature. Schreck, of course, is very well known as the general manager of the CUNC Health Services Society, and he used to run, way back in the old days, the Vancouver Resources Board. Now, you can have at Mr. Davis on his power policies later on, but I want you to deliver a scathing attack as the principal NDP spokesman on what they've done to the health system,
Well, let's
if
look
they've done anything bad.
the major cutbacks came in 1982 when they closed actual wards and beds. What we're dealing with now is Socreds have realized that to take a head-on assault against health care is certain defeat. So what they're doing is they're taking an arm here and a leg there. For instance, British Columbia is the only province in this country that backed the federal move to de-index transfer payments for health and education to the provinces. Bill Bennett at the time and the cabinet ministers responsible stood up and said, 3 cheers, will impose matching cutbacks. BC is the only province in the country that has user fees in hospitals. If we do not eliminate those user fees by March 1987, we will lose $97 million in federal money.
Well, Van der Zam was questioned about that, and he said, well, if that's the case,
Perhaps,
more or less,
maybe, we don't
maybe
know, I'll
we'll
look
review
at it, we'll study. It's the typical Van der Zam response. Now, the fact is, if you're an old age pensioner and you're in hospital, your average length of stay is 25 days. The $8.50 a day user fee completely exhausts your pension check for that month. And what does the province get out of charging you that money? Not one dime, because for every dime they charge you, the federal government subtracts a corresponding dime. It would cost British Columbia nothing to eliminate the user fees, and we would get $97 million back from the federal government.
As a matter of contractual right.
Under the Canada Health Act, which was supported by all 3 political parties.
But
and I want to know where my opponent today stands
You can ask
on
him.
eliminating hospital user fees.
You can ask him that in the next segment. But I want to get back to the NDP. You're well informed on this, but it would seem to me that your overall policy is very much pie in the sky. First of all, your leader Skelly comes out to legislate job security. Now, that's what Monroe wants. He wants every job in the bargaining unit guaranteed by, if not by FIR, by law. Is that not a real kind of, what's the word, make job guarantee at a
Look,
bad time?
we aren't talking about feather bedding, Jack. What we're talking about is decent protection. We have an Industrial Standards Act now. It is currently the law that if you lay someone off, you have to provide a certain period of notice. We're simply saying that if you worked for the same company for 25 years, 2 weeks' notice is not enough. We're saying if you worked for a company for 25 years and they put a piece of equipment in to replace you on the job, that company has to give a longer period of notice. They have some responsibility to provide some retraining. Now, that already happens if you're an executive. If you're an executive at Mac Blow or BC Hydro and they lay you off, you go to the courts and you sue for unjust dismissal. So what those companies do is they hire consultants to help you find another job. We are just talking about giving the guy on the bottom the same break that the guy on the top already gets.
You want to guarantee the jobs of union men for life when you know if I were a social
Jack,
creditor...
that is absolute...
You know if I were a social creditor, I would want to bring
That is absolute distortion and nonsense, and you know it as well as I do. What we're talking about is providing the same kind of job protection and security to the typical working person that a corporate executive already enjoys. We're saying that a company has a responsibility to help that person look for another job and retrain and to give adequate notice.
All right,
2 weeks' notice for a guy with 25 years job security is inadequate.
Let's get to your other one, where every young person is guaranteed a job, a schooling and training until the age 25, is it?
Now, wouldn't it be nice, Jack, to have no one under the age of 25 on welfare? That's what we're talking about. What we're saying is it's one hell of a way to start out in life living on the dole. And if someone under the age of 25 walks into their social worker and says, well, I can't find a job, let me start life going from high school to welfare, What we can say is you have a choice here. We have a job for you for 2 years. And we can say, that's not going to cost us a whole lot because we aren't going to be paying your welfare bill, and we're going to put you to work in a place such as the forest industry, planting trees or thinning or fertilizing, where we also are making an investment both in your future and the province's
And
nature
now you'll
resource.
tell me that it's not going to cost any money.
What I'm saying is that it's a lot better putting kids to work than having them on the dole, and that the cost involved is trivial when you look at the elimination of the welfare cost and the investment in our future. It destroys a young person's entire
I know all the
entire
moral
life.
damage.
Look, not apart from moral damage, Jack. Look what it does to a young person when they start out in life on welfare. We must stop that.
Right? And then we come to the civil servants, who are the target of social credit in many areas. And you would certainly go back, you'd lift the restraint, we're told, you'd give them the right to strike, and put the country back in the hands of these powerful union bosses and pork choppers.
Well, we're putting the control of industrial relations back in the hands of competent negotiators. What we're saying is that if we have incompetent negotiators, we aren't going to cheat. We aren't going to say, I'll make a deal with you, Jack, but as soon as we walk away from the table, my little commissar over here will rewrite the agreement.
Who's a little commissar? CSP?
PEC. Compensation Stabilization Program. What we're saying...
And you would lift that right away.
What we are saying is if you make a deal, if government sits down and negotiates a collective agreement, how can anyone believe government if it's going to violate contracts by appointing someone to break those contracts? We aren't saying we're going to give the shop away. We're saying hard-nosed, tough, free collective bargaining is the way that we work in this society.
And the classic...
When you make a contract, you honor that contract.
And the classic right to strike for everyone except purely essential
Well,
services.
you know, teachers in the rest of the country have the right to strike. How many teacher strikes have you seen in this country?
Oh, just long weekends mostly.
Now, what happens is if the current system with arbitration gives the shop away, nobody has to bear any responsibility, so most agreements go to arbitration.
Okay.
If you're looking at the alternative of losing a week's pay or a month's pay, you're going to bargain much more seriously, and it's much less likely that there's going to be any disputes.
From your NDP point of view, health, you say, is not too bad. We have a good system.
On the we have a basically good system, but what I'm saying is that Socreds have replaced a head-on attack on health care with a planned erosion of health care, 2% per year under the Canada Health Act, throwing away $97 million in federal penalty money, underfunding the alternatives that we need in form of homemakers, and my opponent has to respond on where he stands on those issues.
Education. How badly has social credit damaged education?
Let's look at a case of priorities. In British Columbia, the Ministry of Education puts out some recommended guidelines for core curriculum textbooks. The cost of buying those textbooks every year comes to a little over $22 million. In 85-86, the province spent $14.9 million on textbooks. This year, they upped it a bit with their slush fund to put it at $16 million. We have classes in North Vancouver, social studies classes. They're 3 years into a new curriculum, and those kids still don't have the textbook that's necessary for the course.
How much did we spend?
Government advertising. Compare it. There's your case of priorities. The government spends $22 million, over $22 million a year on government ads. They spend $16 million on textbooks. Now, I say it's quite simple. Give the kids a book and cancel a few government ads. Doesn't cost a dime, changes priorities.
David Schreck, NDP, North Vancouver-Seymour. We will now be joined by Jack Davis, the Minister of Energy in the social credit pro tem government. Who knows? A miracle might happen after the break. I don't know if I can get these two political opponents to go at each other's throats on any particular issues, but let me try a couple of small ones.
Let's talk about where Jack left off in his opening presentation about the ferries. And I'm sure Dick Gathero and Darlene Mazzari, campaigning in Point Grey for the New Democrats, would like to hold Pat McGeer responsible when the minister responsible for the ferries says we're going to have a major ferry terminal somewhere in Point Grey. Now, I want to know which neighborhood in Point Grey is going to be destroyed with a major ferry terminal before October the 22nd.
Jack?
Well, David's all organized. The same people that protest everything else, he wants to get them lined up
Which
against.
neighborhood?
against
And where's it going to go?
I think really, certainly the ferry people prefer Iona, which is really Vancouver Airport, the south side of the North Arm, if I can put it that way, which angles away, if I can put it that way again, from Wreck Beach. But you people must agree that a short crossing over the Strait of Georgia is a good idea.
How much
We're
of
going to
the
wipe
short
out
crossing?
Southwest Marine Drive?
$100 million mainland end, another $100 million eventually the
How much would
island
it
end.
save, though, on ferry traffic, ferry timing?
Long term, it would mean we'd build fewer ferries. We could use the present ferries to deliver far more people. But as far as the user's concerned, it would save an awful lot of energy and a lot of travel time.
No.
He's talking about wiping out either part of the Little Mountain riding or part of the Point Grey riding with a major traffic artery and a major ferry terminal. And the folks that own property there, their property values are going to be affected.
Well, you certainly didn't whip that one up.
Well,
I can
by
see that.
God, how would you like him to? How would you like speculation, Jack, that they're going to put a terminal like that next to your house and then try to sell your house?
Well, Pat McGee may yet build a tunnel through my place in Salt Spring for
Right,
the ferry.
but first, if it's Iona, the presently constructed highway across from the Anasis or the Alex Fraser Bridge running west would continue along Sea Island,
Gentlemen,
along the airport island and out, and it wouldn't
We're
go
not-
through Point Grey at all.
We're not ready to talk. The concept that the minister has is that he could save a lot of money from Iona to Gabriola, and you can gain a lot of hay by saying it's going to wreck Point Grey. We'll see what would happen in due course if it ever comes to. Now, what about the 500,000 jobs that your government promised us at the airport by 1990? I nearly fell over flat
I
in
mean,
my
you don't
back.
really believe even that one, do you, Jack?
Let's be positive. The development of the redevelopment of the airport, the feds have done a reasonably good job of Vancouver International Airport and Vancouver Port development, but they haven't really been closely knit with the community. They haven't had local input. With the province moving into this area, there can be much better coordination overall and a much greater input locally.
Well, I have an advantage on Jack in this one by heading a major insurance company. The part of the scheme that this half 500,000 jobs, that's a 40%. You know how many jobs we have in the province now?
No.
About the same number as we had in 1981, and it's about 1.2 million. So the magnitude that we're talking about is just colossal. But one of the elements of the scheme is to attract financial centers to Vancouver. A couple of months ago, the Ministry of Finance invited the heads of all of the BC insurance companies, of which I am one, to a meeting to talk about one of these schemes. And the scheme was you waive the premium tax to companies that based in BC and export insurance business elsewhere, and then you'll get a lot of companies moving. Every insurance executive at that meeting said that not only would not one single job be created, but British Columbia would lose jobs with that type of scheme.
Can you deny
the
that?
whole
or
thing
is
is
that
fluff.
something-
Well, the whole proposal
But I want
is
to read
fluff.
something else now.
David Schreck basically had 9 minutes talking about legislated job security. If we legislate job security, especially in small firms and so on, we won't have any business coming to BC. We'll have more unemployment than we've ever known.
Minimum wage.
I'd do away with it.
You'd wipe it out.
But
And
I can't say
Let him
that's I
finish.
can't say that's party policy. That's just my
Well,
reaction.
Bill Vandersam said much the same thing.
No, but
And
why
look,
let
what
me find out why he says that. I know what you're going to say. You're going to put it up to $10, but
Quite. Yeah.
Let me say what I'm going to say.
Legislated job security plus a high minimum wage. If the economy can't afford it, we're going to have an incredible number of unemployed in the province. But the case for eliminating a minimum wage is the case for employing young people, people who've not yet been in the labor force, have little experience. They can learn on the job, and they don't have to be paid a $10 an hour minimum wage.
oh, whatever. I
want,
use that
I want,
extravagant.
I want every voter out there who's making $5 or $10 an hour to think what's going to happen to your job security and your wage when some kid's working at $2 an hour for the competition across the street. Your job and your wage is gone, and that's what these people are going to do to you if they win this election.
Okay, let's now get to one of your kind of unusual views on education. I always remember you attacking foreign students in our universities. Do you still believe that they should be charged double or
I
more?
think we should be upfront with foreign students. We should give scholarships to foreign students which cover all our taxpayer costs. I don't think that tens of thousands of children of rich families should be able to come to our universities and get 90% of their costs paid by the BC taxpayer.
Neither do I. What do you think about that?
I think that's a saner position than I heard Jack express in various letters to the editor.
Well, people change.
And that's
No,
good.
I haven't changed.
Well,
It's just that David wants to play on one
well,
aspect of my
but
program.
what I heard in some of Jack's letters to the editor were attacks on Oriental students. And I think that's dangerous when we are trying to build better ties for Pacific Rim trade. A student exchange program is an investment down the line in terms of better ties for Pacific Rim trade. It would be a bloody good idea if we had special programs in British Columbia to teach students Japanese and Chinese.
Fair enough.
It's going to help on those training
Let
programs.
me close with a little, not a challenge, merely say that I have, on the one hand, I have the mega project government, which lived on mega projects, Northeast Coal, SkyTrains to Richmond, Coquihalla, Kelowna, you know, all the rest of it. And then we have the non-revenue producing, non-mega project NDP.
Hold it. You're not going to get away with that non-revenue producing
well,
stuff.
Jack,
Let's look at one element, the forest
Jack
industry.
doesn't believe in mega and minor. I think we all believe that small is beautiful. Certainly the policies I want to be involved in involve plants,
Okay, let me
developments of
And we
any
also
scale at
believe
all.
that revenue producing is beautiful, because unless we get some bucks in this province, nobody's going to be around to pay the welfare bill.
Can the NDP attract it?
No.
Yes,
No.
we certainly can.
Yes.
Look, well, we've got a record of the Socred government. The record is they have not attracted it. Look at the forest industry, for example. Every major forester says we have to be spending $300 million a year on the silviculture program, or regardless of the other issues, we aren't going to have any wood to cut.
Gentlemen.
This government's spending less than 20% of that.
One last word from you, and
Jobs are very important. I don't believe in job security to the extent that government legislates job security for everyone. The only country in the world that's done it is communist Russia, and they have concealed unemployment. We don't need that in BC.
how much did you win by the last time?
5,000 votes.
Did you run against them the last
Yes,
time?
I did.
What do your polls tell you now? Without Van der Zalm, could you make it?
We always run scared. We're going to work hard. Voter apathy is our worry. We've got to get our vote out.
Because you've got such a massive appearance of victory, people won't bother. And the fear of Van der Zalm will bring your people out.
I'm the undisputed underdog, but I want people to remember Bill Van der Zalm just recently said, if you care about jobs, vote NDP.
We all care about jobs, David.
My thanks to David Schreck and to Jack Davis for a bright and lively exchange. You can't cover all the nuances. You just get impressions of who you prefer. I'll be back with an education forum after the break. Once every day during the campaign, Premier Van der Zalm prates and boasts about open government, but he will not be open enough to debate education. So I've got 4 educational experts here, and I'm going to give them a free hand to tell me what is wrong with education in British Columbia at this moment. And my guests just now are Elsie McMurphy, the president of the BC Teachers Federation, and John Waters, the president of the College Institute Educators Association of British Columbia. Now, give me a broad picture if you can. Van der Zalm won't talk to you, so talk to me. How bad is the financing of education in BC at the moment?
Well, over the past 4 years, we've seen the education sector take a particular beating, I think, in terms of the economic support that it's had in our province. I think people realize that our province hasn't been particularly economically advancing over the past 4 years, but education has taken, I think, a much more serious
Prove
position.
it to me simply, revenues versus educational cuts.
Well, over the past 4 years, from 82 to 83, and in fact I have the figures with me, the provincial government revenue has gone up at that time 34%. Provincial government expenditures also have gone up over that period 28%.
Right.
At the same time, the spending on education in all three sectors has gone down. Universities have gone down 9%, colleges have gone down 12%, and the public school system has gone down 13%.
So revenues go up, expenditures generally of government go up, and there's been sharp cuts in all levels of education. Now let's go to John Waters. What has this done to the colleges in BC?
Well, essentially, Jack, it's meant that for a declining amount of operating grants year after year after year, the colleges are expected not only to hold their own in level of service, but to serve an increasing number of students, which means that classes are larger, programs are cut, faculty and staff are cut, support services like counseling, study skills are cut. That means a decline in quality of instruction. It also means that the access to college education is cut in this province.
But were these cuts in the early days of Van der Zalm and the other ministers of education justified in removing what was widely regarded as feather bedding in the system?
No, certainly not. The first cut in this progression occurred in the summer of '82. It was a disorderly, chaotic cut when Mr. Van der Zalm was Minister of Education. It was money taken out of the operating grants that had already been approved, and around the province, every institution scrambled to cut programs, to cut campuses, and that was the beginning in the summer of 1982.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how much has the quality of colleges or the operation of them dropped?
Well, it's very hard to put a percentage figure on that, but I think certainly when you look at the funding figures, you find cuts in the colleges of 15% over the last 5 years, and you find that inflation has been going at the rate of just under 30% over that
How is the
period.
morale of your 2,300 instructors in BC colleges and institutions?
It's bad. A lot of the instructors who were there in '82, '83 are not there anymore. They've been cut. Some instructors have left by choice. The morale is not good. The feeling is that this government does not support college education.
Has your organization taken a direct political position in the campaign?
We've taken a direct political position in that we have put out issue papers on about 11 different issues. We are not...
But you're not backing a party?
We do not give financial support to any particular party, but we encourage any party to support the issues on colleges that we're concerned about.
There was a time when an apple for the teacher was allegedly one of the principal instruments in defeating old W.A.C. Bennett, right? Mm-hmm. Are you in the same kind as the teachers, BC Teachers Federation, of activity today?
No, we in the BC Teachers Federation does not support any party. In fact, our constitution prohibits us from taking any kind of direct political action. Like the college teachers, public school teachers, though, are determined to become very involved in an individual way in this campaign. We want to try to make education an issue because the cutbacks that you've just been talking about in terms of money to the school system have impacted on our lives and our students' lives very directly, and so we're working as hard as we can to try to make some change for education policies in this province.
I've heard you talk many times, you and the teachers, about cuts in support services, cuts in this and cuts in that. How bad have the cuts been? What were they in short summary?
Well, for one example, we've lost some 3,500 teaching positions out of the school system. We've lost, for example,
enrollment is down.
Enrollment is down, but I'll give you an example of my own district. Over the past 4 years, enrollment has actually increased by 0.2%, which is admittedly not much. But at the same time, we have lost 12% of the teachers in my district.
And other cuts.
Yes.
You were talking about
right.
cuts.
Overall in this province, for example, the support services in the school, services like teacher aides, library aides, secretarial people, custodial people, all of those kinds of support services are down approximately 20%. There's been a massive decrease in the kind of support services, and also in the area that children need desperately some help, like child care workers, family support workers, child abuse teams. Those kinds of things are gone from our system as well.
Has this, said he, obviously affected the actual capacity of the teacher to give them a half-decent education?
Well, that's one of our concerns is what is happening to morale in schools as teachers find it they're increasingly unable to meet the needs of the students that they teach, and they're also not able to offer the kind of challenging education that we know we should be offering.
Mind you, you didn't need that, John Waters. You didn't need the individual support service that the school systems needed, did you? I mean, you didn't have the mainstreaming of children with particular problems into the classrooms, that kind of thing.
No, but we did have services at one time that would help students to come back into the system, study skills courses, college prep courses. Those have gone by the board, and that really hurts the very type of student that the college was set out to deal with.
One of the things that bothers me is textbooks. Do you teachers manufacture these alarms about not enough textbooks?
Well, I wish it was a manufactured crisis. I wish, in fact, that it wasn't true. But it really is a grievous situation, and I think also the attitudes that we give our students by not even providing them with the tools to do their job is going to be an unfortunate legacy that the present generation of students is going to take with them. You know, their concept of education, I think, is one that is...
Question to each of you, is there any room for young teachers in the system just now, or are we filling it up with old teachers, not necessarily bad teachers, but no movement upwards for the young people?
In the public schools in British Columbia right now, we have 377 teachers. That's all. 377 teachers under the age of 26 in the whole province.
You got to be joking.
No, those are the actual figures.
Out of 30,000?
Out of 30,000 teachers.
There are fewer than 400 under 26.
When I talk about the 3,500 teaching positions that are gone from the system, not only do we have a lot of unemployed teachers, but also those teachers who are coming out of university are not finding jobs, and we're not getting the younger people moving into the system.
How about your people?
We don't have the numbers, but certainly my experience is that the younger teachers are the ones who have lost their jobs.
Are we losing any good educators because of our salary freezes? You haven't had a raise for some time, have you?
Essentially, the salaries have been frozen for over a period of about 4 to 5 years, but there have been marginal increases.
All right, what does Van der Zam have to do to get your support? One, have a debate with you, if he could.
Well, we would certainly like to see all of the parties put forward their education platforms. And to this day, I must be fair, we have heard from the Liberals and the NDP in I think, fair measure what they would do. But I'm really concerned that we have not heard from Mr. Van der Zam. He said he wants to have open government, and we thought by providing this opportunity that it would give him that I guess, ability to enter into a dialogue with, I know you have thousands of viewers, and certainly it would be...
Yeah, wouldn't do it. Now, do you want the cuts restored? Holus bolus. Can we afford to restore the cuts?
Probably not in 1 year, but what we do need is something more than enthusiasm. The Premier and the Minister of Post-Secondary Education talk a lot about enthusiasm. We need money, we need some thinking, not just enthusiasm. We need more than that.
My thanks to Elsie McMurphy, President BC Teachers Federation. Poor substitute for a debate with Van der Zam, but at least I give you a little time to put your case forward. And with John Waters, President of the College Institute Educators Association of BC. Next, two other interested parties in the education debate and crisis in British Columbia after the break. Russ Fraser used to run the Parks Board in Vancouver, is the post-secondary education minister in the social credit campaign team and in the government. And he made a couple of statements recently, one of which has been summarized that if you're poor, you can't get to university in BC, or that people should put off their education if they can't afford it. And he has also said that BC is paying its fair share of college and university costs. Well, I have here now two people. Marg Fartaczek, Chairman of the Canadian Federation of Students Pacific Region, and Sidney Mindess, the President of the Confederation of University Faculty Association. And you've got 3,000 members in your faculty.
Right.
Give me a short, sharp, succinct appreciation of the way the BC government treats universities.
Well, over the last 3 or 4 years, they've been treated badly. The operating grants have been cut. We've had more severe cuts than any other jurisdiction in North America. The only province in Canada to have university grants cut over the last 3 or 4 years. And what we find now is increasing morale problems amongst faculty, and good faculty beginning to drift away. It's known to headhunters out there that UBC is a good place to raid now.
In other words, because you can't get big money at UBC, and if you go, if I'm some kind of genius professor, when I go, I take my research grants with me.
Well, you don't even have to be a genius professor. I think many of the good professors are finding offers elsewhere. At Toronto, for instance, the average salaries are about $7,000 a year higher than at UBC.
Now, what about the overall financing picture of universities? We used to say that BC diverted its grants for other things. Do you still make that allegation?
I guess we do, although in a technical sense, the grants come to the province unfettered and they can spend it however they wish. But certainly we have not been getting the increases that the federal government has put into the EPF transfers.
Are we the second stingiest province next to Prince Edward Island in the money we give to universities?
Yes, we are.
Is it that bad?
It is, and I don't think we should focus on faculty salaries. We see it throughout the university system. There are insufficient support staff. We don't have the modern equipment that we should have in a first-rate research university. And so the whole quality of the enterprise is declining.
What do you want Van der Zalm to do if he wins the election? If the NDP wins, I presume they will roll out the red carpet for you. Is that your feeling?
I think that we would like any government to simply restore the universities to consideration as an important part of the BC economy and begin to fund them realistically.
Now I'm going to turn to Marg Fartaczek, Chairman of the Canadian Federation of Students Pacific Region. Tell me some horror stories about how students are treated in BC, but they must be accurate.
Well, in British Columbia, post-secondary education funding, as you well know, is one of the worst in Canada. In the last 3 years, funding in every other province has been increased. In BC, it's been cut by 10%. Every student in this province knows that as a result of those funding cuts, we've seen course cuts, crowded classrooms, programs and services cuts. We've seen enrollment limitations at the University of British Columbia, specifically this spring, overloaded facilities. British Columbia, we have seen that tuition fees are among the highest, and in the last 4 years, they've doubled. Add to that, British Columbia has one of the worst student assistance programs in Canada, the worst.
Tell me about the, I'm a student. What's the, and compared to other provinces across the country, can you tell me what the averages are, for instance, nationwide and in British Columbia on student aid in 85-86?
In 85-86, well, I'll tell you, the student assistance program compared to Alberta's student assistance program, the government there has put a priority on it such that this year they're spending $116 million on student assistance. Now that's a combination of grants and loans in the program, and it's based on need. This province in British Columbia this year will be spending approximately $17.5 million on student aid. Now that's considerably less than Alberta, and they have a smaller population to boot to fund those programs.
They've got their heritage money, but the fact is that they've made it a priority, and for their lesser number of students, around 120 million, and for BC, more students, around less than 20 million.
Yes. And what we're seeing, in 1984, the government eliminated the grant portion of the student assistance program. Now in every other province, there's a grant portion to the student assistance program. What this eliminating the grant has done is increase the student debt load so that we have one of the highest student debt loads in Canada.
Can you get loans from somewhere?
Yeah, it's all loans. The student assistance program is
You don't get anything here for grants and need.
No grants, and it's not based on need. This government in the last 4 years has gone increasingly towards a scholastic achievement ability basis for the student assistance program.
In other words, what Russ Fraser, the minister, says is correct, that if you're poor, you can't get to university in BC.
That's what we're seeing.
Now, what's this that you want me to hold up?
Well, this graph shows what realistically we have in British Columbia. We have fewer students that are coming from high school going on to post-secondary education. This is the participation rate for universities.
The one at the very bottom is British Columbia's record of full-time equivalent participation in universities compared to the other provinces.
That's us. And I might add, this year, June, the figures for 86 are such that the national average is 25% of Canadians are going on. British Columbia's average is 17%. And if you consider, if you look at the trend lines for the province, in the interior, that is well below 6% of all students in the interior and parts out of the metropolitan area going on to post-secondary education.
Now, back to the universities again. You speak on behalf of the faculty. How many faculties are there?
There are three.
How many people? How many people?
About 3,000.
About 3,000. And do you find that the university administration supports you in your fight for better recognition? Or do they merely sit back and say, well, what the government gives us is what we get?
No, I think the administrations have been supportive, but of course they have to live with the grants that they get from the government. I know that all three administrations have been actively lobbying government to try and improve the funding situation. And,
Have we still got this kind of body in the middle, the committee?
yes, the university's council still exists, although I
And
don't...
they have given the total amount of money to be divided between the universities?
That's correct.
And do they fight these universities to get the money between each other?
There's probably a bit of fighting, but the council seems to use a kind of a formula, and over the last 3 years they've apportioned the funds in the same way each year.
Back to you, Marg. Now, you've made a very impressive case. Somebody tells me that BC spent an average of $66 in student aid last year, and the average across the country was $670. Now, what does this do to the student at UBC? Have you noticed a kind of apathy about this? Or do you know anybody who's dropping out because they can't get grants in need or half-decent aid?
We're seeing students at the universities and the colleges living well below the poverty level that has been established by the federal government. And we're actually, during the last couple of weeks, we're sponsoring a series on student assistance, a task force on student assistance that's gone across the campuses in British Columbia. And we found students that, due to the lack of funding towards each student and the funding within the program, are living just barely meeting their needs. A woman at Langara, for instance, her foregone costs were $702.75 per month. And with the student loan that she was able to get, which was the maximum student loan she was able to get, it was $703 that she was able to put towards it.
And there are no, there must be a shortage of part-time jobs. In the good old days, you could always get a job and work your way through university.
Yeah, we're seeing that unemployment rates for returning students in British Columbia rank very low or very high.
Would you move second and carry a resolution that whatever government gets in, they must restore education financing?
They must restore education financing in the context of looking at the overall spectrum of who can afford it, who can go, and how we can address it to make it more accessible for everybody.
And to you, Sidney?
I agree completely, and the problem of student participation is a very severe one.
It is a major issue, and you'll vote on October 22 on it, and I'll be back after the break. Whoever wins the election October 22, it would seem to be a foregone conclusion that somebody must do something about refinancing or improving the financing of education. Who's going to do it is up to you. Which way it's going to be prioritized is up to you. But they've got to get a better deal. See you at 5 p.m. precisely.